It's a brand new Coleman on Purpose, and in this chapter, we are going to discuss my outlook on the similarities and differences of adolescent life and adulthood. How do many experiences of childhood affect our journey to discovering purpose as adults? I have an interesting movie that explains this and so much more. Chapter 17 of COP begins now. What is going on, everyone, and welcome to another chapter of Coleman on Purpose. This is David J. Coleman here, and I'm really excited to start chapter 17 with you today of my podcast. I had a wonderful time last time with Lisa Nicole, which was gracious enough to come on and give us a beautiful episode about purpose, and it really got me thinking about things and how the flow of everything has been over just this past year of podcasting. And when I prepare for a podcast, it's almost like I start thinking of a lot of ideas. So I write down all of my ideas and things I want to talk about. And usually what happens is I'll have other ideas while I'm thinking about what I want to talk about for the season. And so it just happened with this episode. It was way further down the line of things because it was something that came to my head. And now I've moved it up to this chapter. So regardless of whatever I wanted to start this season with, this is what I wanted to do with this chapter. So this is called When I Grow Up. And this particular chapter came because I was sitting on a layover. I had a long layover in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I'm from Ohio. If you guys didn't already know, I live in North Carolina now, but I'm originally from Ohio. I claim that now instead of saying St. Louis because I lived in Ohio for the majority of my life. So I was sitting in Cincinnati on a layover there, and I wanted to catch up with Netflix movies because I really do stay behind on a lot of movies nowadays. It's very, very, very bad. I have a bad habit of not maybe beginning a series and maybe not following up on it till 6 months later, or if I want to watch a movie, I'll save it and then I won't watch it till a year later. So it gets really bad. I love musicals, as you know, if you watch previous episodes that I have done, which was the one about The Wiz, I love musicals. So they came out with a musical called Matilda, and Matilda had an original movie. I still have not seen the original. Please do not beat me up because I have not seen the original movie version of Matilda. I read the book when I was in elementary school, but I have not watched the full out movie that came out, I think, in the 90s. I don't think I've watched it all the way through. Let's put it that way. But a musical is always going to catch my attention. So I ended up finding this, this movie on Netflix, and I wanted to watch it for the longest time. And I was sitting in Cincinnati and I was like, hey, why not watch it? So I got some breakfast from down there in Cincy, and I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch this movie today. And when I tell you, I absolutely loved the movie, the musical Matilda. Whatever Netflix did with the original and changing the book and the adaptation of the book and the other movie that came out in the 90s, and then just making it into a musical and kind of getting it from the Broadway version that had been out for a while, I was pleasantly surprised at how good that musical was. And so as I was sitting there, I particularly liked one of the songs. So the story, basically, let me give you a little backstory on Matilda in the first place. The story Matilda surrounds a young girl that grows up in a verbally abusive type home. That's what I call it, verbally abusive type home. And her parents seem to care more about themselves and making sure they're taken care of and not really taking care of the child that they have there, their own child. She likes to read books. She's very special, very intelligent, a wonderful, creative, beautiful, nice girl. And she has a lot of spunk in her. And so I particularly loved the movie because it spoke to a different part of me, but the music really touched me in different ways. And Matilda in this musical is determined to change her story. Even if things look crazy or impossible and just look unbearable and she can't overcome them, she's always going to try to figure out a solution and find ways to go about doing things. And so there was a particular song, like I was saying, that stuck out in my head and was called When I Grow Up. Now, I know when y'all hear When I Grow Up, you think of maybe like Pussycat Dolls or something, that when I grow up, I want to be, I want to be a movie. And originally, at one point in time, I was going to do like something about that whole song. But this song was a total different take on When I Grow Up. And I really started to listen to it, and as I listened to the song more and more, and I put it on my like little playlist and everything like that, like it just makes me happy. And so I listen to the lyrics of the music, and there are a few that stuck out to me. So the song says, when I grow up, I will be tall enough to reach the branches that I need to reach to climb the trees you get to climb when you grow up. And then it goes into saying, when I grow up, I will be strong enough to carry all the heavy things you have to haul around with you when you're a grown up. And then it says, when I grow up, I will be brave enough to fight the creatures that you have to fight beneath the bed each night to be a grown up. And so, from a child's perspective, this is a child that's singing these lyrics, and it it really brought me to like this think piece about it. And I don't know why, but I try to look at this through an adult lens. As you're looking at what a child is talking about at their young age, I wanted to kind of look at it through an adult lens. And so I started writing down notes about this. And usually I get some of my best, my best information, and some of the best things I have sometimes come to me maybe when I'm on a trip or when I'm flying around or something like that. I'll get these ideas and I'll write them down. And that's the one thing that I do love about musicals, is though they find ways to intertwine what is meant to one could mean something to a child, and it means something totally different to an adult. It intertwines generations and generations. The musical will always do that. Whether you watch something like Annie, whether you watch something like Wicked, it's made for kids almost, but it still has very adult like materials that's trying to get a message out to the consumer. And the song kind of makes me flash back to earlier times when I was in such a rush to grow up. I think about how when I was younger, I always wanted to say, like, I can't wait to have a house. I can't wait to, have kids. I can't wait to do all of these different types of things that I felt like were such a privilege to be an adult. And when I think back to it sometimes, I'm like, wow, adulting is no joke. And just life in general is no joke, even in the times that we live in now. I'm not going to say any time was easier or harder. It's just very, very different nowadays, just growing up and being in this thing that we call life. But there was one particular part of the song that hit hard. And I had not realized it until I went to YouTube to watch like the video versions and like the karaoke. I was doing everything because I like to sing the song along and all that stuff like that. So when I was looking at one of the comments under there, one of the comments underneath said, basically, and I sometimes like to read those comments, and I'll come across one that gives a deep meaning. And it basically was saying that we are in such a rush as children to be adults that we don't realize when we are older, we have to struggle and deal with some types of issues as an adult. For instance, we may not be able to carry heavy things when we're older, but we'll have to carry heavy issues. So, like when the child was talking about being able to just maybe pick up a large stick that's too heavy to carry, I looked at that in a different way, because I was like, oh my gosh, we actually have struggles and problems and trials that we have to go through as adults when it all comes down to it. And it might not be as easy as what that stick is to pick up when we're an adult, but there's heavier things that come along. And it almost was like a trade-off when I was thinking about and listening to the song, because you're basically like, as an adult, you are having to carry heavy things. When a child is looking up to you and trying to find ways to better themselves, you have to be that example. But sometimes we're not even trained enough as, children to know what we're walking into as adults sometimes. And so we sometimes don't handle every situation the same way, or we don't walk into the situation at the same pace, or at the same pace as what it would be to be a child. And so earlier I was talking about how Matilda was able to persevere even through what looked hopeless. And basically how as children we have minds that haven't fully developed. So we are somewhat fearless. And so I think about that in this sense. And when I'm talking about all of these things that the adult says they'll be able to be brave enough to fight the creatures under the bed, or all the things that we're scared of as children, we have those little fears, but those come from other things that the world has portrayed. So whether we've watched horror movies, whether we've kind of adjusted ourselves or had a dysfunctional type family, maybe it may show its head in different types of ways. And so I think that as children, we're told all of these different things that we need to either fear, or even we see it right in our faces now. Think about all like the things that we've been hearing about, from school shootings to people just walking into broad daylight and shooting up places and doing different things like that. It's like the fear is already instilled into you, and I think like it's like heightened even more now, even as children going to school, which is a place of protection, even a church, walking into a church, which is supposed to be a place of solace and all of those things. You think about those things and you're like, oh my gosh, like we are fearful of these things. And how are we supposed to look out for these young kids and these people that are growing up and be those examples if we're not trying to make life less fearful for them? Yes, you have to fear things, but I do believe that sometimes when you fear too much, it blocks you from doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, walking into your purpose, doing the things that you're supposed to do. You have so many fears that have been built up over time by what an adult has told you, what the media has told you, what the news has told you, that you don't quite get to those places of, oh my gosh, I can peacefully walk into my purpose. No, I have to be frightened to death and march forward. Why should it have to be that way? We prepare children now for what they are going to be in the future. And I don't think many people really think about it now, because everybody does look out maybe for themselves. I do feel like my generation in general, where I'm at in my age group, was really trying to just survive. I do believe, like I talk about this new generation Z, they have so much more oomph in them. You know what I'm saying? And it's not, and I'm not saying, I don't really know if our generation has even paved the way for that generation. They just kind of marched in the beat of their own drum. But I feel like our generation was trying to kind of play catch up, because we were trying to be considerate of, the people that came before us. We were trying to make sure that everything was perfect before we got out into the world. We were trying to make sure we were financially stable before we got into the world. We were trying to make sure we had this home that our parents had. We were trying to make sure that we had all of our things together. And in a way, we were frightened. I do believe many of us were frightened to march forward. Some of us were able to and do it, but not to say that there wasn't fear marching forward. There's always going to be fear marching forward, but I think it's the level of fear that we place into others that can sometimes cripple you from getting to where you need to be, if you know what I'm saying. So I think about those things, and I said, even when we are in school, we're taught things like never talk to strangers. This might happen, or when we watch films, like I was saying before, about death, or even these tragic events we've been seeing. That stuff just kind of builds inside of us. So in a way, I look back at some of my childhood and the things that alleviated some of that fear. Sometimes I might watch a scary movie, or I might be afraid of something, but I will give a shout out to something that I feel like is trying to shift right now. I will give a shout out to Disney. I grew up as a Disney kid, and many things we were taught, even with Disney growing up as a church kid, like Disney was bad. There was a lot of magic involved. There was a lot of animals talk. It was just a lot of things. Like, animals had humanistic characteristics, and a lot of, like, it's really ingrained in your mind that Disney has a lot of things that are bad. But I think there was more good that came from Disney than when you think of the bad. And I believe Disney. Even when I went to Disney World this past year, I went at the end of last year, and I watched the fireworks show going on at Disney, and the things that they were saying, like while the fireworks show was going on, about dreaming and believing and keeping the imagination of a child. It just, something about Disney does something to you that just makes you feel like, yes, you're grown up now. You're having to worry about these things, but you kind of go in with a carefree attitude when you walk into a place like that, because it's just like relieve all of what the world is right now. You go into a different world, and you don't stay in a dream world. I'm not saying stay in a dream world forever, but it does alleviate, and it opens up those portals of your mind that are more creative, that have a fun to them, that is not always drudge and dreary and just bad things going on. It just makes you happy, and it's like it does remind me of a safer place, just to encompass yourself for a little while and just get away from just the monotonous days that go by of the same old. And it brings you into a happier place. And Disney has always tried to promote that through the cartoons, through the programming that they've tried to make for family and different things like that. I believe that they've always promoted that. There might not be things that everyone agrees with that they do, but I do believe that there was more good than bad that came from what Disney gives us in general. I always say this, that not staying in that land of make believe all the time is great, but it is always great to get away. Now, some people do that with vacations. They don't necessarily have to go to Disney to do that. They go with vacations. But I do believe when you're looking at children play around and children having fun, it brings you back to that place of, yes, you can still do anything you want to do in life. You can still have all these ideas and these beliefs and everything. It can all be normalized. It doesn't have to just be everything straightforward. You can open up your mind to so much more. And I do like that about Disney, that they do that. Everything is not always so raw like we think it is. And I do believe that people kind of, I would say, probably want it to be raw and cut like that is, but I think that there are so many different paths to get to where you need to go, and there's so many avenues you can take to get where you want to be in life. And some people choose to take that road of creativity, imagination, and everything is not so raw and cutthroat. I think a lot of times when people think very business, you kind of get out of the mindset of thinking creatively, because you are trying to get to where all of that flow of money is coming and where everything is happening. And I think that can be helpful, but as well detrimental, because you want to make sure you have an open mind and that you're ready to receive what other energies you're receiving when you're walking into those businesses, when you're doing those things. It's important. So to me, when I watched that movie Matilda, I believe that it really did symbolize a lot of those things, because you had a teacher who was very raw and cutthroat from some of her past traumas. You had, and this was the principal, Trunchbull or whatever her name was. She was horrible. Like, she was just very cutthroat. She wanted everything to be done like she did back in the day. And that kind of reminds me of sometimes what generations before us kind of do. They're like, well, this worked for me, so we're going to see if this works for you, without kind of just testing some different methods to see. But I love that this new generation of parents is kind of testing and seeing what works best for this generation. I don't know if everybody was equipped for either Generation X or my generation. If everything, they were just trying to make it because they saw their parents just make it. And this movie, that principle kind of symbolizes that. She was like, well, I did this back in the day, so you all need to be just as tough and rough, and I need to make you tough just like me. And not everybody is like that, especially not Matilda at that time. And then you have also your people over here, like the teacher who has these traumas. It was a beautiful lady. Her name, I follow her on Instagram, but her name is not coming to my head right now, but she was in The Woman King. I loved her so much. She played the teacher, and she had past traumas of things that had happened, and she kind of grew up with this principle, which we find out towards the end of, the movie. And so when you think about those things and you see like the traumas that person had to carry all that time, but she looked into the eyes of a child that was kind of fearless and walked into things and knew that she could change things if she really put her mind to it. It was just really, really great. Of course, they brought like a magical aspect into it, but I really believe that there was a deeper meaning to even that. Like, even though she was changing things or making people float and doing all those things, I think a lot of those things were just in her mind. Like, she knew that she could do it. She knew that she could overcome it. And she ends up happy at the end. Of course, there's a happy ending, but not everybody has those happy endings. I believe everybody has to go through their own struggles. I do believe that people have different situations that they walk into or that they grow up in that can make you more fearful of certain things. So you're not always able to stand in what you believe or know that you're doing what is right. So it just takes experience, and it takes taking chances and just not knowing that you're going to walk into anything like just overly fearful. Yes, you can have yeah, you can be very timid about it, or just walking into things like, I'm just gonna take a little back seat right now and just kind of feel it out, but don't let that cripple you. And I can say that definitely to myself, because I've allowed that to cripple me in many, many ways, from walking forward sometimes in my acting, that from doing things that I really truly enjoy to do. But I said, I'm no longer gonna let that stuff cripple me. I'm gonna move forward. So I say, you have to grow up. You have to handle your responsibilities as an adult, but never lose your sense of optimism. There is always a better. There's always better. You have a better life. You can have better hopes. You can have better dreams. You can have better health, and just a sense of a better well-being if you truly keep that sense that there is something greater and that there is something bigger than just you, and that you can be out here making that difference because of what you have to impart into the world, or you can help a whole tribe of people, kind of like Matilda did, helped all of those kids that were all scared by really walking in with determination and saying you can do anything. They all rose up and said, no more of this. We can fight this if we put our minds to it. And they did what they had to do. So even looking at a children's movie like that is so amazing, the things that you will get from stuff like that, thinking about just growing up and being who you are. I just never want people to let life take the fearlessness of a child out of them. Like, never let life take that fearlessness out of you. Even if your childhood was stripped from you, you can find ways to get back to those places and retrain your mind on how to live and to do fun things and to bring a sense of carefree into your life. And that's basically what I wanted to say on this chapter 17. I want to thank you all so much for supporting Coleman on Purpose, for listening to all the chapters, for following. Please follow me on YouTube. I am on YouTube at Deluxe Dave. It's very easy to find. All of my stuff is there. I made my page look a little bit different right now. Go there. Please follow and subscribe. I would really appreciate your support. Also, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Deluxe Dave, DeluxeDave. I'm trying to get everything over to Deluxe Dave so y'all know where to go. Also, I'm on TikTok at David J, DAVIDJ Coleman, or you can follow me on TikTok at my Coleman on Purpose page, where I place other things that I'm doing with this podcast directly on that page. Once again, I want to remind you that you are unique, you are loved, and you are created for greatness. Till the next chapter, peace.